Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My computer has just clicked over to 9:30, and so I'm going to open this hearing into the Saham Toney Neighbourhood Plan. Am I saying your village right, Saham Toney?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
good. That's positive. And thank you, everyone, for coming online nice and early, because it's always a stress that with these virtual hearings that someone's trying to connect, or more importantly, the examiner's trying to connect and can't join the meeting. So thank you, everyone. My name is John Slater, and I'm a Chartered Town Planner, and I've been employed or appointed by Breckland Council, the local planning authority, with the consent of Saham Toney Parish Council, the qualifying body responsible for the preparation of this plan. The role of the neighbourhood plan examiner is set out in the legislation. Unlike a local plan examination, my remit is solely to determine whether the plan meets the basic conditions and the legal requirements. It's not a test of whether it's a sound plan. My task is to ensure that the submitted plans meets all the statutory tests that a neighbourhood plan is required to meet. Just to remind everyone, the legal tests include whether the plan contains policies relating to the use and development of land. It does not include what is called excluded developments, which covers mineral and waste development, for example, or nationally significant infrastructure projects. The 6 basic conditions tests are as follows: whether it is appropriate that the plan is made having regard to Secretary of State policy and advice, and that's tends to be set out in the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, Planning Practice Guidance, and written ministerial statements. The next one is whether it will deliver sustainable development. And we'll be looking at that. Whether it is in general conformity with the strategic policies set out in the development plan, which I'm assuming is the Breckland local plan. Whether the plan complies with European legislation, including the Human Rights Act, and whether the relevant sections of the Habitat Regulations 2017 have been complied with. As an examiner, I have 3 options open to me in respect of the neighbourhood plan. I can recommend that the plan goes to referendum unamended. I can recommend that the plan can go to referendum if suitably modified in line with my recommendations, or I can recommend that the plan does not go to referendum. As a general rule, examinations are expected to be dealt with by the consideration of written material only. And whilst we're only looking at a specific number of issues, I will be considering all representations made at Regulation 16. But today we're going to be concentrating on a specific number of topics, and it doesn't mean that other issues aren't going to be fully considered as part of my examination. The holding of a public hearing is exceptional, but I have decided one is necessary to allow me to properly examine this plan, and in particular to explore a number of issues which I've already set out. In these days of the COVID-19 pandemic, actual holding face-to-face hearings can't take place, and we're meeting today via Microsoft Teams, and the proceedings are being streamed so that the public can see the proceedings, and I believe a recording will be made and placed on both the councils and the parish council websites, if possible. And I'm assuming that everyone taking part in today's hearing is agreeable that the proceedings be recorded. Today's sessions will look at the topics which I set out in my initial comments document dated the 20th of January. These will be the framework for today's discussions, and there may be other supplementary matters that we explore today. I've issued a guidance note and agenda for today's virtual hearing, and that includes the agenda. And hopefully everyone will have seen that. It's basically my intention to try and stick to the running order, and it also sets out the principles of how I will be conducting this hearing. Once I've dealt with any housekeeping matters, I will then make some preliminary comments which will set the scene for today's discussion. And I'm going to offer the opportunity of parties to introduce themselves and to the Parish Council to make some opening remarks. As I said in the guidance notes, I will be leading today's discussions and I will be the person to ask the questions. But I want to allow all parties to be able to contribute fully. And if you indicate that you wish to contribute, please do not hesitate in trying to gain my attention, raising your hand or whatever, so I can invite your participation. I want today's hearings to be as informal and relaxed as possible, but at the same time recognise that the hearing's purpose is serious, in that it is intended to help me come to conclusions on a document that will form part of the development plan used to determine planning applications over the next decade or so. I'm confident that we should be able to deal with all matters in the one day, and I have ambitions that we will finish by lunchtime, but I suspect that's probably rather optimistic. Today's hearing is a bit of a first for me because I'm conducting a hearing before I've actually visited your plan area, and I'm fully intending to make my visit as soon as government travel restrictions allow. So we will be concentrating on more policy issues rather than necessarily site-specific issues. I am very conscious that as an outsider, you as local representatives and residents will know your village far better than I do, so please bear with me when I get places wrong or whatever. I'm proposing to call for an adjournment mid-morning, and if we need to go into the afternoon, I'll break for lunch about 1 o'clock. I really must stress that at this stage, in all the issues, my mind is not made up, and I am here in listening mode, and by asking questions, it will help me come to my conclusions, which I will then take forward in my report. My options are limited by the legislation as to what I can and can't consider, but essentially I will be driven by the Town and Country Planning Act, and in particular whether the plan can go forward having regard to the basic conditions. That's my cornerstone. Are there any matters of procedure for today's hearing, or any matters that people want to raise at this stage before I ask Brian to introduce the Parish Council team? No, okay. Brian, I know Chris is going to be leading, but as Parish Councillor, would you like to introduce the Saham Toney team, please?
Yes, thank you, John. Good morning to you all. Let me welcome you to the parish of Saham Toney and the people representing the parish here today. First of all, we have Jill Glenn, who is the accomplished parish clerk and has been for many years, and clerk to the steering group. Will you raise your hand, Jill, just so everybody knows? Thank you. Thank you. Myself, myself from the council, Brian Hinkins, parish councillor, ex-chairman and chair of the NP steering group for a period of 5 years. I'll raise my hand. And now on to the NP work group. Chris Blow, leader of the NP work group. Chris, identify yourself.
He's disappeared.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes, I'm here.
He's got his. Chris, you're on. Your microphone's muted.
Yeah, I'm here.
Have you turned your camera off?
That's
Chris?
it, gotcha.
No.
Okay, Chris, thank you. We have Andrew Walmsley, who is work group co-leader. Thank you, Andrew. And Rachel Hogger, consultant to the MP group. Thank you, Rachel.
Good morning, Rachel. Morning, everyone.
That's the introduction from the parish council point of view.
Thank you, Susan. I'll ask Susan because I said I point the questions. Can you introduce the team representing Breckland, the local planning authority, please?
Yes, thank you very much. In terms of sort of individuals from Breckland Council, first of all, we have Chris Hobson. Chris, can you wave your hand?
Hi there, everybody.
Hi.
Chris is from the Principal Planning Officer from the Development Management Team or Planning Application Teams in terms of plain English. In terms of housing, we have both Lisa Oakley and James Heaton. Just to clarify, Lisa, will you be taking a lead today or will James?
Morning, everyone. It will be a combination, a combo team between James and I. Thank you.
Okay. And then last but not least, Andy Darcy, the Planning Policy Team Manager, and has been involved with sorting out some of the technical bits and pieces to set up the hearing. So many thanks for all the work he's done on that so far.
Hi.
And then last but not least, my name's Susan Heinrich. I'm the Neighbourhood Planning Coordinator, and I have sole responsibility for assisting parish councils produce neighbourhood plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I just got some preliminary comments to make before I invite the parish council to offer some introductory remarks. First of all, thank you both parties, the parish council and Breckland, for the summary information that you provided on Monday. It's helpful. It's helped me frame some of the questions and help me prepare. I firstly want to congratulate the Saham Toney Parish Council for submitting what is a very clear and well presented document. It uses maps very clearly and photographs. I almost got a feel for the area without having visited. It is one of the longest neighbourhood plans I've actually encountered, but we don't measure it in terms of necessarily pages, but I think it's the second longest neighbourhood plan that I've dealt with. The largest was Bracknell, which is the largest neighbourhood plan area in the country. But it's very clear to me, reading the plan, that it's addressing issues that are important to the village and the villagers. And that's a key role for neighbourhood plans. They don't need to duplicate local plans. They just need to focus on the issues that the residents are asked to deal with it. I also want to commend the parish council for the depth of the evidence base that sits behind the plan, and I'll be relying on those documents as I prepare my examination report. I've gone through most. I haven't gone through all of them, but there is. I should imagine that we're going into the thousands of pages by the time I count out everything, and I haven't gone through every single document at this stage. On the issue, one of the things I want to explore is whether there is information that is repeated throughout the plan in terms of individual sites and policies that could perhaps be presented in a more concise way. And I'm raising this issue because the Secretary of State guidances and I quote, "Whilst the contents of plans will vary depending on the nature of the area and the matters to be addressed, all plans need to be focused, concise, and as accessible as possible." Moving on, the legislation covering neighbourhood plans is that the neighbourhood plan, as part of the development plan, is setting policies on how planning applications are to be determined. It's not a document that can prescribe how planning applications are processed, who needs to be consulted, and what information needs to be provided with a planning application. Whilst planning policies across a district can vary where there are neighbourhood plans in place, there is an expectation that planning procedures will be applied consistently, and these matters are covered by secondary legislation such as the Development Management Procedures Order. Moving on, the Parish Council has taken a remarkably positive approach to the question of housing numbers and allocating sites beyond the numbers that would be expected from the local plan. Believe me, that is a really refreshing position to be within. Many a neighbourhood plan is seeking to constrain development to the absolute maximum that is allowed by the local plan, and I commend the Parish Council. On the other hand, the plan is very prescriptive in terms of being specific as to precise housing numbers on sites, how the sites should be laid out, the actual phasing of developments in a number of phases, what social and physical infrastructure needs to be in place before development can take place, and even to some extent stipulating who occupies rental housing accommodation that is built on some sites. I'll be testing today whether a more flexible approach may allow the plan to be able to do what the legislation and the policy, which is to shape development and add a local dimension to the strategic policies set out in the local plan without unduly restricting development in too rigid a fashion. Just to say that I think the topic A, which is looking at the plan, will probably take up the most part of the certainly this morning's session, but we'll then be in time looking at the 8 policies that cover surface water flooding, which I can appreciate is at the top of residents' concerns in view of flooding events that have taken place in the village over the last decade or so. I will be testing the extent to which the choice of sites has been influenced by whether sites are at risk of flooding. We will be then looking at the question of whether enshrining technical requirements in the form of planning policy is a necessary and appropriate response to the issue. We will be discussing what information is needed to be supplied before a planning authority can establish the principle of development. Is it necessary for the planning authority in deciding whether to allow the development to know whether a technical solution to flooding is available without actually designing that flood system before the application is determined? Just to give an analogy to set context the way I'm thinking, a policy could require a site to be appropriately landscaped so that it blends into the locality without knowing the precise species and planting density and maintenance and watering regime at a planning application stage. Finally, as I said earlier, the purpose, if I'm asking questions, is to test the plan against the basic conditions. I have not made up my mind in any way, and I'm very much listening to the arguments and will be taking away and reflecting on them at the end of the hearing. That concludes my opening